I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. We are now learning more about some of the other concessions that Kevin McCarthy had to give as he sold shares of himself to ultimately secure the speakership after 15 humiliating roll call votes, finally becoming the speaker on the 15th roll call vote, the weakest Speaker of the House in American history. We'll talk about some of the other concessions at the end of this video, but one of the main concessions that swayed MAGA extremists like Scott Perry, Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, and Andy Biggs, all of them who sought pardons, not just for their conduct during the January 6th insurrection, but blanket pardons for all of their criminality throughout their entire life. The provision that they wanted is as part of this so-called select committee that was supposedly going to investigate the weaponization, as they call it, and the politicization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. They wanted a provision inserted that this special select committee can also gain access to materials relating to ongoing criminal investigations being pursued by the Department of Justice and the FBI. So previously, one of the concessions that McCarthy gave during the early roll call counts that he was still losing, though, was to establish this select committee. And the purpose of this select committee, the same way there's a January 6th select committee, which was actually to investigate something very serious, the January 6th insurrection. Here, what the MAGA Republicans want to have is a select committee that is going to attack the Department of Justice and the FBI, because the Department of Justice and the FBI are engaged in criminal investigations of domestic terrorists like Donald Trump, as well as the other insurrectionists. And that right there is frightening, insurrectionist members of Congress. And so they want to get their hands on the documents, one, to see if they're in trouble, and two, to protect their friends, the domestic terrorists who are part, essentially, of their terrorist cell that they're a part of. I don't want to mince words here. Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, Scott Perry, Andy Biggs are insurrectionists. They may be members of Congress, but they are also insurrectionists who sought pardons from Donald Trump. And so if you compare and contrast the drafts from the earlier House proposed resolution in the rules package to the one that ultimately convinced people like Matt Gaetz and Gosar and Perry and Biggs to change their vote and support McCarthy, you can actually see it in the document itself. So here, let's pull up the document. So if we pull up the most recent document, what you'll see is the establishment of this select committee. This is going to go into the rules package proposal to be voted on next week. I mean, who knows if they'll even have the votes for that. They didn't even have the votes for the Speaker of the House, but this is part of the proposed rules package. And what it says is establishing a select committee on the weaponization of the federal government as a select investigative subcommittee of the Committee on the Judiciary. So what that means is that ultimately Jim Jordan will be the individual who oversees this select committee. All subpoenas will be signed by Jim Jordan and under Jim Jordan's supervision. It talks about the process of selecting who is going to be members of the subcommittee. 13 members, and 5 would be picked in consultation with the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries. So 5 members likely to be representative of the Democratic Party, although we will see what Kevin McCarthy does there, and the MAGA Republicans will likely try to block that as well. And then as you go into the investigative functions and authority, and you go into subsection A, it basically says the select committee is authorized and directed to conduct a full and complete investigation and study, and not later than January 2nd, 2025, issue a final report to the House of its findings in such interim reports as it may deem necessary regarding A, the expansive role of Article 2 authority vested in the executive branch to collect information on or otherwise investigate citizens of the United States, including ongoing criminal investigations. That line right there, the comma, including ongoing criminal investigations in that subsection A, was added at the request of those MAGA extremists like Gates and Biggs and Perry, individuals who sought pardons for their own criminal conduct. They're demanding that they need access to these criminal files on ongoing criminal investigations because they're afraid that they're likely targets of criminal investigations by Special Counsel Jack Smith and the Department of Justice, and they want to protect their other domestic terrorist friends. That's why they added that provision there. So if you just go to the other previous document, the House resolution draft, before it was edited to include that language. Here, if we go look at investigative functions on this one, and you look at subsection A, all it says in this one is the expansive role of Article 2 authority vested in the Federal Bureau of Investigations, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Justice to collect information on or otherwise investigate American citizens. That does not have the language that I just read, including ongoing criminal investigations. And note that in the previous draft, it specifically listed FBI, Department of Justice, and Homeland Security. Here, it's even broader to basically say all executive branch functions that engage in investigation without even naming specific departments. If you go down to look at some of what the other provisions are that this so-called select committee is going to be focused on, subsection B, how executive branch agencies work with, obtain information from, and provide information to the private sector, nonprofit entities, or other government agencies to facilitate action against American citizens, including the extent, if any, to which alleged or improper, unconstitutional, or unethical activities were engaged in by the executive branch or private sector against citizens of the United States. That's focused on the interactions between the FBI and social media companies. That is the obsession that during the Trump administration, October of 2020, what the FBI would do, by the way, the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, is someone who Donald Trump appointed, although Donald Trump attacks Christopher Wray and all the MAGA Republicans attack a Republican, Christopher Wray, and call him a rhino. What the FBI would do, they're the feds. There's a reason they're called the feds. It's like the Republicans go, oh my gosh, the feds are the feds. They would reach out to social media companies to try to gather information on potential domestic terrorists and people who were fomenting violence. And the FBI would propose on occasions, hey, maybe you should ban that person, or we're conducting an investigation on that person. Twitter or the social media companies weren't compelled to do anything, but it's so bizarre that now you have the Republicans going, oh my gosh, the FBI does things that the FBI does. The feds are engaged in having conversations like this. That's why they're called the feds. But really, what this is at is trying to give cover to domestic terrorists like Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, and frankly, like the insurrectionist members of Congress who wanted to overthrow our democracy on January 6th. Now, this is subsection C. How executive branch agencies collect, compile, analyze, use, or disseminate information about citizens of the United States, including any unconstitutional, illegal, or unethical activities committed against citizens of the United States. D, the laws, programs, and activities of the executive branch as they relate to the collection of information on the citizens of the United States and the sources and methods used for the collection of information on citizens on the United States. So there they want the sources and methods. For example, do they use informants? How does the Department of Justice, how does Special Counsel, how do they know, for example, that Donald Trump was stealing documents and concealing them at Mar-a-Lago? They want to get the sources and methods of the information. That's one of the things that the January 6th committee is asking for here. As you go down E, any other issues related to the violation of civil liberties, F, any other matter relating to the information collected pursuant to the investigation conducted under this paragraph at any time during the Congress. Now, here's the thing, though, I want to point out. While this select committee claims that they have the authority for this just because they are pronouncing that this is going to be the scope, that doesn't mean the Department of Justice is going to need to comply. If indeed the type of information they're seeking is information about ongoing criminal investigations, for example, about Donald Trump or about members of Congress or about domestic terrorist groups that are protected by the confidentiality of grand jury proceedings, one of the things which are always done in secret, what the Department of Justice will do in response to a subpoena that Jim Jordan sent, the same way that these members of Congress refused to respond to the subpoenas by the January 6th committee, what the Department of Justice is going to do if they get a subpoena is they're going to bring a lawsuit in federal court to seek an injunction to block the subpoena based on the privileges that the executive branch has. And one of those privileges is to protect the sources and methods of the executive branch's work, that grand jury proceedings incur confidentiality, and that document shouldn't be given to people who could potentially misuse it or who are potentially targets of the criminal investigation. And so just because, to be clear, that these radical MAGA extremists are giving themselves this power, and while there is a significant oversight power that members of Congress have, it doesn't mean the Department of Justice is just going to roll over and be like, sure. And also what this may do, inadvertently or perhaps, on purpose, probably inadvertently, is it's going to speed up the criminal investigation by special counsel Jack Smith. Ultimately, once the criminal case is filed, the grand jury proceedings are not secret anymore. And once the case is filed, the documents are available. Now, there may be, in the interest of our national security as well, which may be another grounds for potential objections here. Although one of the things that this select committee does is they link themselves with the Intelligence Committee. And why would they be linking themselves here also with the Intelligence Committee? Because one of the arguments that they're going to anticipate is that, well, these documents are highly classified, and so we at the Judiciary Committee can't get it, the Intelligence Committee can get it, but now we all want to see these highly classified records. But I think the Department of Justice will try to fight it and say, no, we're not going to give you sources and methods of ongoing criminal investigations. We have our own powers and authority of the executive branch. The final point I want to make, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, though, is that here you have MAGA Republicans very clearly attacking law enforcement. Now, if you have friends or family in law enforcement, I want you to share this video with them and let them know. Here, what they are saying is they are attacking the FBI. They are attacking the Department of Justice. They are attacking, by the way, the same way that all these MAGA Republicans like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, when Ashley Babbitt's mother got arrested because she would not comply with the police officers, they basically all attacked the D.C. Metropolitan Police. They attack the Capitol Police officers, and they say horrible and horrific things about them when the police officers just said, please comply. Stay on the sidewalk. You can't go there. And Ashley Babbitt's mom, who was, basically harassing the cops, eventually got arrested. It's kind of the F around and find out what's going to happen, and you should comply with the orders that you're given. So I think that's an important point. And in addition to attacking law enforcement, which is right there, they're also attacking the military, because some of the other concessions that Kevin McCarthy has agreed to is to defund the military by approximately $100 billion. Look, ultimately, this rule package has to be approved. So we're going to see what are Republicans going to do, the ones who claim they support the troops, now that and support the military industry generally, that $100 billion is being cut. And the reason that MAGA Republicans want to cut $100 billion and defund the military is because they want to attack Ukraine for Vladimir Putin. If you watched all of these speeches given on the House floor by MAGA Republicans, they attacked Zelensky, they attacked Ukraine, and they didn't mention Vladimir Putin's name, but essentially made it clear they are rooting for Russia in their unlawful invasion to defeat Ukraine, which is courageously defeating Russia. That is who the MAGA Republicans are, because let's face it, they are in the pocket of Vladimir Putin and Russia. That is something that I think is beyond a doubt. One of the other concessions that Kevin McCarthy had to make to these MAGA Republicans as well is to default on our debt. And when these debt ceiling conversations arise, the rules that would prevent us from defaulting on our debt, those will be removed. And that's something that, I'm far more concerned about than, frankly, this Department of Justice language, because I think the DOJ is just going to say, no, we're not turning that over, or we'll turn this over, and that'll be litigated over the next year to 2 years. And if members of the DOJ and members of the FBI are called to speak before this select committee, they're going to make the select committee look ridiculous. What select committee is going to go and just attack the police officers? But the defaulting on our debt, that means you may lose your Medicare. You may lose your Social Security. This isn't fear-mongering. You may lose your 401ks, in addition to the fact that our military is going to be defunded because one of the things is to allow us to default on our debt. They want to shut government down, and they likely will shut government down in about 6 to 7 months when the debt ceiling conversations start coming to the fore. But we will, of course, follow that. Confident President Biden's going to be very tough about it, but that's what we got to do. We'll follow that. So Kevin McCarthy, an utter traitor, an utter coward, completely weak, showing you the language right there of criminals wanting to have access to criminal investigations, ostensibly of them, and that's a concession that Kevin McCarthy gave. Let's just call Republicans what they are: extremists, criminals, traitors. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. Also, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. You'll love the exclusive content on Patreon, but most importantly, help grow this independent media platform, since that's the only way this is funded. We have no outside investors at all. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.